Depression. Depression stops you when you do something bad or silly or you learn from it. Now, I see depression as like physical pain. When I was a child, I burnt myself, cut myself, jumped off balconies, twisted my ankle, all those things. And I learned, I said, I'm not going to do that. So right now, I don't really suffer from pain. Occasionally I get a little bit of pain when I do something silly and it pulls me back and I learn from it. And so depression tells you that you've done something wrong and don't do it again. You need it. You regret all that sort of stuff. But the problem is if it persists, it's not helpful at all. It in fact is very detrimental, and that's why people with back pain, headaches and other sorts of pains become completely crippled with their pain. And that's why people take so much paracetamol. They want to get rid of it so that they can live their life. So depression should be short and appropriate. So if somebody dies, who's a loved one dies, it should be for a little while, but it shouldn't be for 2 years. Mania. Mania is feeling really happy. Hello, like you get a great feeling when you've passed an exam or you've studied really hard for, your football team has won the grand final. That's mania. When you feel mania or feel manic, you feel invincible, you feel great, you feel as if you can do whatever you want. It's a feeling that we all like. It's not a good thing to have mania when you shouldn't have it. And you see it regularly because adolescents tend to be a little bit moody, unstable, and they flick from being moody to being overconfident. I can do anything, back-chatting, all that sort of stuff. People who are manic will think, I can do anything, and they overspend, they have inappropriate relationships, and they don't care. It's interesting, people with mania, that's things they just don't have any regret because they're the greatest. It's good for salesmen, it's good for politicians, but generally it's not good for life because you do silly things and cause great problems. Aggression, well, in our 21st century, we don't like people who are aggressive. You can channel your aggression to motivate you, but it's not a very good thing to feel aggressive. So if anybody says something slights you slightly, you shouldn't get angry, or if somebody cuts you off, you shouldn't react with a strong emotional aggression. Empathy. Empathy is really interesting. That's how you attach to people, and it's got some very positive things. It keeps families together. It keeps communities together. It keeps marriages together. Because you empathize with somebody, you feel for those people, and they feel for you. That's one of the big things about humans. We are very empathetic. It can be fairly indiscriminate. You look at dogs, they're very empathetic. They love you, they want to be with you, all that sort of stuff. And we've bred them to be that way. But it can be very twisted. Look at cults. People become part of a group and you feel very obliged to the cult. You see people who are being abused in relationships and they feel they can't let the other person down despite the fact the person is clearly doing bad things to them. If you identify with people, you identify with political parties, and we can see that in America now. There's such bipartisanship, there's such fracture between the Democrats and the Republicans, and people who love Trump, no matter what he does, and people who hate him. It's not rational, a lot of it. They don't think it through. They just don't like him. If you are empathetic and you're in a very stressful situation, like men who are fighting in a small group, you can become extremely attached to the people around you. And there's many examples of people going out and giving up their lives for their friends. That's empathy. So you have to look to see whether it's appropriate or not appropriate. You want it, because if you're not, you're just a cold person. But you don't want to be too empathetic because you can get yourself into a big mess. And I won't discuss sexual arousal. Now, one of the things about emotion is that emotion makes you irrational. We think that we feel as we think. Not so. No, no, no. We think as we feel. We use this, our rational self, to justify why we're feeling this way. Why do I like Donald Trump? Because he makes me feel good. But what about this and this and this? No, I like him. So successful politicians run on the emotion much more than they run on the rational. It's very hard to make a rational case against an emotional case. If you fall in love with somebody, empathetic, you will make excuses all the time. That it's a good person. Oh, he's only out there because of, work or something. Or if people come to see me and somebody says, look, this guy he's a bit, he likes his medications too much, then you've got a resistance. But if somebody says to me and they've come and somebody's told them that he's a good doctor, then they believe everything I say. And I've got to be careful that, no, not everything I say is right. I don't want people to just attach to me empathetically and believe everything I say. I want them to be critical. I would find it a criticism if somebody said Dr. Butler is emotional. Because as a professional, what people want from me is rationality. They don't want emotion. If they want emotion, they go to a snake oil salesman who will tell them anything. That's if you want emotion. If you want rationality, you want somebody who can think through the problems, not get confused with empathy, sympathy, or anything else. Just say, this is what the issues are, and this is what we have to do to solve the problem. It's really important to realise that when you're emotional, you're not rational. If you are angry at the bank manager, you're going to blow up. If you're a salesperson and you've fallen in love with a car, you're going to buy it then. And the salespeople will play on your emotions. So, that's your emotions. The question is, when is it good and when are these interactions good, when are the interactions bad? What I look at is resilience. I look at people, how they're coping with their environment. Most of us can't change our environment. We can't change our genetics, we can't change how we were brought up, we can't change our circumstances very much. It's very, very difficult. But how can we cope with our circumstances and maximise our potential? So I think that all of us want to be contented, feel as if we've contributed, done something useful, and I think it's important to feel like that you contribute to society. You don't become a pariah, you don't destroy. You don't want to have a conscience and feel as if you haven't achieved anything. So how do you fiddle around and get it right? Well, there's many solutions that people put up. Let me talk about a few of them. I think that one of the most important things to stabilise the brain is exercise. We've evolved over millions of years, thousands of years, and up until the last 50 years, everyone, especially children and young people, exercised. Most people, their work was physical. Boys would go out with their fathers onto the fields and do physical work and work all day. Girls would work with their mothers. They would be in the laundry, cleaning the house, no washing machines or anything like that. And they would be doing the laundry, which was very physical. It was constant movement and work. What do we do today? Well, if you don't want to do anything, you can get a bus, sit down, look at a computer game and not do anything. And it's clear that if you want to stabilise the brain, you need exercise and you need a lot of it. If you go to any big expensive private school, you will find their greatest facilities are the sporting facilities. It's not their science lab they don't show you. They may show you the library, but they always show you their rugby fields, their hockey fields, their indoor swimming. Why is that? Because they know that for development, probably the most important thing is exercise and sport, and especially team sports where you have to learn to collaborate and work with others and put up with things that are unfair and umpires that don't make the right decision and overcome those problems and have disappointments. Exercise. 2, it's very important that the food is right. So if you're talking about ADHD, which is overstimulation, what stimulates you? Well, sugar. Everyone knows that. You have a sugar drink, you get a sugar hit. And if you really want to get a big sugar hit, you add a bit of caffeine. So we have Coca-Cola and Red Bull, and then as you get a bit older, people have coffee and cake. Sugar, caffeine. The only problem with that is it puts it up, and then you come crashing down. So you get this up and down and up and down and up and down. So if you can get yourself more stable, you'll do better without this yo-yoing. Sleep. Sleep's very important. If you have an attentional problem and you're presented with a stimulating thing such as a computer game, which is you'll arouse yourself, you'll get your brain in a high state of arousal and keep it going. But when you take away that stimulus, that visual stimulus, the instantaneous stimulus, you will crash. So you'll go till midnight or 1 o'clock playing Fortnite, and then you can't function the next day. So you've got to be careful. Computer games do the worst thing. They stimulate and upregulate your arousal system, but don't do any exercise to stabilise it. Then we talk about counselling. Well, the things that are shown in counselling are cognitive behavioural therapy and mindfulness, meditation. Cognitive behavioural therapy is when you are anxious about something, you think of something else. You take your mind off the thing that you are obsessing about. Mindfulness is to just calm the brain down. Just settle it down. And they work. But they only work with people who can concentrate, not people who have problems with the dopamine systems or the prefrontal cortex and motivation. They work for people with motivation, but not for these other people. With these other sorts of medications, you talk about dopamine. There's certain medications that you can use, especially sort of Ritalin, and also Ritalin methylphenidate. It stabilises noradrenaline. So when the noradrenaline's too much, it brings it down, and when it's too little, it brings it up. It's a stabiliser of the normal adrenaline system. These ones put it to sleep, things like clonidine. And if you want to reduce the amount of emotion, anxiety, depression and those things, you can use medications which increase serotonin, they're called the SSRIs, the antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and that's where they work on serotonin, but they don't always work. These ones work a lot better than the SSRIs. They're more predictable what they're going to do. Now, a lot of people take chemicals in their lives to help them. I take caffeine. That's to get me going. People who are anxious take, and they take alcohol. It calms you down, it takes your anxiety away, it takes your depression away. The only problem is, if you rely on it for that, when you wake up the next day, you're actually worse off. So you become hooked on it. You become dependent on sort of alcohol. The interesting thing about adult ADD and ADHD is that people say, well, wait a minute, where is it? Well, it's always been there. It's 5 or 10% of the population. What is the medic drug that people take for ADHD as adults? It's nicotine. If you talk to people who are fidgety, can't concentrate, they have a cigarette. calms them down and they can concentrate. That's what nicotine does. And so you find that 5 or 10% of the population in Australia at the present are still smoking. Why? It's because they can't function without it. Just like children can't function without, some of them can't function without their Ritalin or function properly, so people can't function without their cigarettes. And this is something that has to be addressed. In summary, we are the product of time and learning, with the interaction between our prefrontal cortex and learning how to behave, our arousal system, and our emotions. And they interact and keep interacting. And what is important, if a person is not interacting with their environment well, try and work out where the problem is. Can they think straight? Are they motivated? Is their arousal system too low or too high? Is their emotions too prolonged, too inappropriate, too much? When you work those out, then you can target what you have to do, and that can be a combination of all the above. But at least you know what you're doing, and that's important. And if it doesn't work, you have a combination of exercise, some counselling, maybe meditation, diet, sleep, and then if that's not working very well, medication. As a combination, all, not just one or the other, or they are in competition with each other. They are actually complementary.